students, welcome to the Progressive Movement Overview.
You can see him arrive. He stood 6'6" and weighed 245, kind of broad at his shoulder.
Okay, you can hear that song that I had on in the background. It's called Big Bad John. At the very beginning of that song, maybe you heard those kind of like pickaxe noises. That's because it's about a miner, and he was a really tough, strong, tall, big person. They called him Big Bad John. That's going to come up later, so don't forget about that. Here's an overview of what you have to expect for this module. So by now, you've already done 1, 2, 3, 4 modules. Give yourself a high five. You've been working really hard. Good effort. Okay, so if we open up the Progressive Movement module, we'll see our standard 3.4. Basically, what we want to see from students on this module is if you can identify the causes and effects of the progressive movement. And I'm going to pause there. What is the progressive movement? That is in your other video that I've made, and it's going to be posted here. And it's also answered here in the progressive movement slides. So if you first read that and you think, am I really meeting my learning goal? Do I really know what caused it and what happened after the progressive movement? If you can look back at the end of this module and answer that, then you have met this standard. And I have a few things you can do to try and meet that standard. What we're going to focus on in this standard is the labor movement and something called the Schofield mine disaster. And then a little bit on child labor reforms. So once you go into the reading, I tried to condense a lot of our stuff this week because I want you to have time to catch up. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. So I made our reading really small. I could call this 3 paragraphs worth of reading, and I think you can totally do it. If you put forth the effort and you manage your time well, I think you can be really successful with it. After you do the reading, you have 4 questions here. If you want to use the reading while you answer the questions, I think that would be a great idea. Finally, you will have a quiz, and it's called the Progressive Movement Quiz. So you have instructions for this quiz. It's unlike any quiz we've ever done in class, and it says, listen to the song Big Bad John. Remember that song I had playing at the beginning? Let me just play a little sample of it again.
And narrow at the hip, and everybody knew you didn't give no lip to Big John. Big Bad John.
I know, it's catchy. It's going to be in your head. I hope it is. So I'm going to pause it there. And I do not own any rights to that song just for legal reasons. This comes from someone named Jimmy Dean, released in 1961, and it explains early mining conditions. Anyway, you'll have a quiz here. You'll have to listen to that song before you take the test. If you want to leave it open, there is one that has lyrics as well. And as you listen to that song and go through answering the questions, that's okay if you want to have it open. One of your quiz questions is going to ask you about this picture that I've just opened up here. And this is also in your slides. So this should already be familiar by the time you get to your quiz. It's going to ask you to compare the character in Big Bad John to this character in this photograph here. I want to take a moment and show you some of the images of mining at the time. So here's some of the photographs. So usually what happens is you have this rail car here. That's what you're pushing into the mines. And you're collecting things like coal and zinc and iron and all that good stuff that our economy needs to be successful. And as you go, you build these posts made of just timber to keep your lid, your roof, from collapsing on you. Please pay attention to what's happening in this photograph. Let's look at this right here. Maybe even this one back here. Some of these. Do you notice how they're kind of bending? This indicates that this mine is not as safe as it could be. But at the time, working conditions were not a priority. There was more focus on making money than making sure your workers were safe. That might sound weird to us today because that's not very normal. Usually our companies and our bosses and our employers, they want to keep us safe. not just make money. And we'll talk about child labor in this unit because they were so small. So this child is helping to stabilize this cart, and you can see the tracks that it would be on to haul such heavy things. You would need some tough workers. They worked in some small spaces, so you'd have to be okay going underground, and you would risk a collapse. You would risk these hazardous things like lights instead of lanterns, because that was pretty early before like flashlights and lanterns. You would risk a buildup of coal dust. You would risk an explosion. Here is a clip from the Salt Lake Tribune, the newspaper that is still around today. This was written May 2nd in the year 1900. It was an early Wednesday morning. People got their newspaper, and you can see the headline says, "Most appalling mine horror." Appalling means something really bad happened. The greatest calamity in the history of mining in the West. Remember, when we talk about the West, we're really talking about Utah. Explosion at Schofield kills 250. Disaster in the property of Pleasant Valley Coal Company. And if you were to keep reading, it would give you more details. The mining company did feel really bad and tried to help compensate the loss those families experienced. They paid for burial clothes. They paid for a coffin. They gave the families some cash to try and make things better, but that really wasn't enough for those grieving families. Those grieving families looked at this tragedy, this most appalling calamity, and they said, enough is enough. We want safer working conditions. This is a picture that's also in your class textbook, but because you can't see that, it is a little pixely. They're carrying out on stretchers some of the victims from that explosion. Because of that explosion, so that was one of the cause, is that it wasn't safe. The effect is that more people are going to unite together to form a labor union, and they're going to demand that they get paid more money and that they get safer working conditions. Here are some lyrics to a song called "There Is Power in the Union." I think a question on your quiz is also going to ask you about one of these, or this song. Why do you think people would be inspired to join a union after listening to this song? What words in here are going to motivate people to band together and fight for the safety they needed? And then it will continue there if you want to pause your screen. Let me just check and see if I do. Okay, so let me show you these. Here are the Big Bad John lyrics. If you want to pause your screens, and you can read them there in case it's hard to hear. It tells a story about this John, so try and look for words that tell his story and what he was like. All right, as always, I'm here to answer any questions you might have about this unit, and good luck.